Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, in a small cottage at the edge of a dense, dark forest, lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and two children, Hansel and Gretel. The family had very little to eat, and when a great famine spread across the land, the woodcutter could no longer provide for his family. Desperate and worried, the woodcutter's wife, who was Hansel and Gretel's stepmother, hatched a cruel plan. One night, as the children lay in their beds, unable to sleep due to hunger, they overheard their stepmother speaking to their father. "We must get rid of the children," she said coldly. "There are too many mouths to feed. Tomorrow, we will take them deep into the forest and leave them there." The woodcutter was horrified. "I cannot do that," he replied. "How can I abandon my own children in the forest, where wild animals will surely devour them?" But the stepmother was relentless. "If we don't, we will all starve," she insisted. "You must do as I say." Hansel, who had been listening through a crack in the door, decided he needed to act. After their parents went to bed, he slipped out of the house and gathered as many white pebbles as he could find, stuffing them into his pockets. He returned to bed, reassuring his worried sister, Gretel, that he had a plan. The next morning, the stepmother woke the children early and told them they were going into the forest to gather wood. She gave them each a small piece of bread, their only food for the day. As they walked, Hansel dropped the white pebbles, one by one, marking the path they took. When they reached the heart of the forest, the stepmother told the children to wait while she and their father went to cut wood. Hansel and Gretel waited all day, but their parents did not return. As night fell, Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. "Don't worry, Gretel. We will find our way home." When the moon rose, its light illuminated the white pebbles, and the children followed the path back to their cottage. Their father was overjoyed to see them, for he had never wanted to abandon them. But their stepmother was furious. A few days later, the famine worsened, and once again the stepmother demanded that the woodcutter take the children into the forest. This time, she made sure they could not gather pebbles by locking them in their room. But Hansel was clever. He crumbled his bread and left a trail of crumbs behind. As they walked deeper into the forest, when the stepmother and woodcutter left them again, Hansel and Gretel tried to follow the breadcrumb trail. But the crumbs had been eaten by birds. Lost and scared, they wandered deeper into the forest, searching for shelter. After hours of walking, they came upon a clearing and saw a most astonishing sight: a house made entirely of candy. The walls were gingerbread, the roof was tiled with chocolate, and the windows were sugar panes. Starving and exhausted, Hansel and Gretel began to eat the candy. As they feasted, a voice called out from inside the house, "Nibble, nibble, little mouse. Who is nibbling at my house?" The children stopped in their tracks as the door creaked open and an old woman emerged. She looked kind and gentle, and she invited them inside. "My dear children, come in," she said. "You must be hungry. I have plenty of food inside." Hansel and Gretel, worried but too hungry to resist, followed her into the house. Inside, they found a table laden with delicious foods: roasted meats, fresh bread, fruits, and pastries. The old woman, who seemed so kind, was, in fact, a wicked witch who lured children into her candy house to eat them. She locked Hansel in a cage and forced Gretel to do all the household chores. Every day, she would check on Hansel, feeling his fingers to see if he was getting fat enough to eat. But Hansel, clever as always, held out a bone instead of his finger. And the witch, who had poor eyesight, was fooled into thinking he was still too thin. Weeks passed, and the witch grew impatient. "I don't care if he's fat or thin," she said one day. I'm going to eat him anyway. She ordered Gretel to fetch water and stoke the fire in the oven. Once the fire was blazing, she planned to push Gretel into the oven as well. But Gretel, though scared, was also clever. As the witch bent over to inspect the oven, Gretel gave her a mighty push, and the witch tumbled into the flames. Gretel quickly shut the oven door, ensuring the witch could not escape. She then freed Hansel from his cage, and the siblings hugged each other, relieved to be safe. As they explored the witch's house, they discovered chests filled with jewels and gold. They filled their pockets with the treasures and set off to find their way home. With the witch gone, the birds and animals of the forest, grateful for their freedom, helped guide Hansel and Gretel back to their cottage. When they finally arrived home, their father greeted them with tears of joy. He had been heartbroken since their disappearance, and in their absence, their stepmother had died. Hansel and Gretel showed their father the treasures they had brought, ensuring that they would never go hungry again. The family lived happily ever after, grateful for their reunion and the lessons they had learned. Hansel and Gretel's bravery and cleverness had saved them from a terrible fate, and their story was told for generations. A tale of courage, ingenuity, and the enduring bond between siblings. And so, Hansel and Gretel's adventure came to a close, with the promise that they would always look out for one another, no matter what challenges they might face.